Hello, fellow Bigfoot enthusiasts. I want to welcome you to the old bear's den of Bigfoot again today. This is a second video second story that I'm making from our Discord last night, Saturday night. The first one was uploaded overnight. This one will be uploaded and hopefully on by Monday morning. Anyway, this story happens near Montgomery, West Virginia. And in this story, we have what fellow Bigfooters, people that know about Bigfoot and know about the types of Bigfoot. This is what we call a gugway or a Janoskwa, depending upon which Indian name that you want to go with, that these were given. They're known as face eaters. They eat men. In this story, we have a fellow truck driver that I met near Montgomery, West Virginia, here a few months ago, and got to talking to the man, and he relayed to me this story. Back in November, he had been hunting this area all October and the first part of November through the rut for that white-tailed deer have here in the state of West Virginia. And he was after a certain buck. He passed up quite a few different deer in the area, and he was after a certain 12-point buck. He never saw the buck during daylight hours after September, and he was in there pretty much every weekend and sometimes 1 or 2 days during the week trying to get this buck with a bow. So the rifle season started here the week of Thanksgiving of last year, of 2018. He went in there the first morning. There was supposed to be a couple guys that meet up with him where he was wanting to go, and they were all supposed to be in there together to hunt. Well, his buddies never showed up by 5:30 in the morning. He was already there waiting by 5 o'clock, waiting on them to get there because he knew he had a little bit of a walk to get where he wanted to go, at least a half-a-mile walk. So he decided to get all of his stuff ready, thinking maybe the guys would show up. Well, they didn't show up by the time that he got everything ready. So he took off on his own to where he was going to go and sit and watch for this buck. There was an area that the buck, he'd seen the buck on his game cams in the last few days. He had got the video the 2 days before, and the deer was in there on Saturday. It had been in there on the previous Thursday. There was no pictures of it on Sunday, so he guessed that it might be in there on Monday morning. So he was in there hunting, got there where he wanted to sit well before daylight, probably 15 minutes or 20 minutes before daylight. And while sitting there before daylight, he didn't hear any of the normal, birds that start chirping and everything before daylight. So he got to the spot where he was wanting to sit. He was wanting to sit on a high wall. And a high wall is where they have been in there surface mining and cut a long bit of ground out, and they cut the coal seam out and left the high rock wall that was at the end of the coal seam there in place. Now, while sitting on this top of this high wall, it got daylight. He didn't see anything. He didn't see any of the normal, the small game, the squirrels and rabbits that you typically see, or grouse or anything of that nature. Never heard anything, never saw anything all morning long till about 11 o'clock when he decided to get up and go back to his pickup. Now, he's got a half a mile walk back to his pickup, and he was hoping to get a hold of his buddies and get them to come in there and let them go down, pick places to hunt, and maybe that would move that buck out sooner and he could get a shot at it. Anyway, he got almost back to his truck and he noticed something was strange about his pickup. He walked up to his pickup and the hood on his pickup had been crushed. He never heard it happen. You know, he was a half a mile away, so it's kind of hard to hear this. So he couldn't find any where anybody else had drove in there, or any four-wheeler tracks or side-by-side tracks. Didn't see any boot prints in the mud, and he checked around his truck and checked back out the road for, you know, fresh tracks to see maybe he could find who had been in there and dented the hood of his truck. Anyway, he didn't find anything, and he was kind of bummed out by his truck, but he decided to eat his lunch, and that he wasn't going to let that stop him from hunting for the rest of the day. So he's a dedicated deer hunter. In order for him to get out of that evening, he decided he was going to check under his hood. He raised the hood as far as he could get it because it was pretty well trashed, so he couldn't get it up too far, but it didn't look like it hurt anything on top of the motor. Then he tried to start his pickup, and it started. Well, right after he shut his pickup off, his phone rang, and it was his buddy wanting to know where he was at. He went to where he told him he was going to be, he said. And he said, no, you didn't come far enough from where you're at. Go up to the very next road on the left. That's where I'm at. Come out that road. So his buddy shows up, and his buddy gets out and says, what in the world happened to your truck? Well, they decide to take off and try to find what happened, you know, how this happened to his truck. And they got ready to take off for the afternoon hunt. And he got back out there about 1:15 or so in the afternoon, and sat in the same spot that he was before, and his buddy wasn't but 100 yards or so, supposed to be 150 yards from him. He got sit down and he heard some noise, and then he saw something. He saw something brown, or he thought was brown or a gray, you know, it could be a deer hide, coming through the woods. So he's getting ready thinking it's going to be the big buck. Well, this thing steps out 30 feet below him into an opening, and he sees something that he has never saw before. He didn't know exactly what it was. He thought it was a man at first, but then it walked underneath to where his tree stand was at, and it took him 5 sticks of the 3-foot stick steps that go up into his tree stand, because he had a tree stand that attaches to the tree, and he had put sticks up to it so he could get up into the tree quietly. Well, anyway, he goes up to the tree. This thing is up to the top of the 3rd step when it walks past the steps on the tree. So that makes it about 9 foot tall. All of a sudden he gets a feeling he shouldn't be there, so he gets up and starts to walk out quietly. He starts back out to his pickup, and I guess he stepped on something, and he said he turned around and looked back, and this thing was looking right up in his direction. So he decides to leave caution to the wind, and he took off and went back towards his truck, called his buddy on the radios that they had together, and said, hey, there's something down here. It's 9 foot tall. It looks like a man, but it's covered in hair. His buddy says, I'll meet you at the truck. I'll be right there. They get back to the truck, and they're deciding, they're unloading their guns. They're putting their clothes off, their hunting clothes, getting ready to get in their pickup, and they look down the road where they just came from, And lo and behold, this thing steps out. And it's standing there, staring at him. So they decide, his buddy jumps in his pickup and takes off. He gets in his pickup, starts his pickup, and starts down the road behind his buddy. They get to the end of the road where they have to turn right or turn left. And now these are not regular roads. These are like old coal mine roads that have grown up on the sides. He gets right there next to the berm, and he has to the turn, and he has to slam on his brakes because his buddy's truck's sitting right there with the brake lights on, and his buddy sitting in the truck with both hands on the steering wheel, just staring straight forward. He jumps out of his truck, grabs his sidearm that he carries with him at all times, gets out, walks up, taps on his buddy's window. His buddy rolls the window down. He looks at his buddy and says, "What in the world are you sitting here for? We got to go. This thing's following us." He said the only thing that came out of his buddy's mouth was, "It was huge. It was big." He can't understand why his buddy's acting this way, and he doesn't understand what he's talking about. And he pretty much has to just about shake his buddy out of it. And his buddy tells him, he said, "I seen one walking across this road. It had to be at least 12 foot tall. It was ugly looking. It looked mean. It looked mad. It looked pissed off at the world." He said this thing was at least 12 foot tall, 5 to 6 foot across its chest. Said that it was just huge. The arms hung down almost to its knees. And here's the part that really scared his buddy, because he's part Indian, and his family, he has half his family is of Indian descent, and the thing looked at him and bared its teeth and growled at him, and when it growled at him, it showed its teeth. Its teeth were all jagged teeth. They were not normal type Bigfoot that has human type teeth. This thing had teeth that looked like it was from a shark, is what he described it as. Not the big, thick teeth like a shark's got, wide teeth, but every tooth looked like almost like a dagger. He said the thing just turned and walked over into the woods, and that's whenever you pulled up behind me, and this thing walked off. It took off through back the way we just came from. So they were sitting there. He gets his buddy straightened out and says, "Man, we got to go. These things are going to hurt us. They're going to kill us. We got to get out of here." So they get out of there, and they don't go back for nothing. He left his tree stand in there for the next, 6 months. 6 months later, we fast forward to the time of the end of March, 1st of April. And at that time, he went in with 5 other buddies. Everybody had a high-powered rifle. Everybody was carrying a sidearm. They went in there on side-by-sides and went down to go get his tree stand and let his buddies stand guard while he got the tree stand out of the tree and his game cams. Well, going down the mountainside, there were trees across the road, the four-wheeler path that went off the hill. They had to cut their way in, got in there so far, and there was like a myriad of trees that were pushed across the road in the shape of a big X. So one of his buddies that had a semi-automatic rifle and in the AR platform went in with him to the tree stand. He climbed in the tree, took the tree stand out, got it all fixed together, tied together, and they walked out with it. And on their way out, something was following them from a distance. He said it sounded like maybe 100 yards or less from them. You could tell that it was big, heavy footfalls, and it never made a sound or a growl or anything until they got back to where the other guys were at. This thing screamed right before they got to their buddies. When they come popping up out of the woods, their buddies were already climbing into their side-by-sides. They threw the tree stand in the back of the side-by-side that him and his buddy with the AR were on, and this thing started screaming at them and kept getting closer and closer, and his buddy emptied the AR, a 30-round clip, back into the woods where it was coming from. They don't believe that they hit this thing because you would figure it would make a scream or a noise that it got hit. So he figures he hit a bunch of trees or the bullets just exploded from out of the AR. Anyway, they come flying up the mountainside on their side-by-sides. They fly back out, get to their trucks, drive their side-by-sides right onto the trailers because they had left the gates down just in case they needed to make a quick getaway, which was a smart move. And they put the side-by-sides on there, threw them in park, shut them off, jumped off, through the gates, the ramps, up into the, closed the ramps, which was the gate, on each one of the trailers, and took off out of there in 3 separate pickups, 6 guys. Evidently nobody ever unloaded until they got back to the blacktop. They heard this thing screaming and running at them while they were getting in their pickups, leaving. And they said they heard another scream coming from a different direction, which was much closer to them. They don't know which one that it was, but they knew that they had to get out of there. So they have not been back to this area. They do not want to go back to this area. His buddy that he hunted in there with explained to him that they were a Dugway or a Janoskwa, depending upon which Indian tribe you went by, but both of them mean man-eater or face-eater. So they do not hunt this area anymore, and this area is near a small town here in West Virginia. It's not heavily populated in that area where it was at. It's an old strip mine that was there, and I've been in there bear hunting, but it was a long time ago when I was in there. And we know that there's ponds in there, and I know there's quite a few deer in that area, and there's bear in that area, so there's quite a bit of game for those Bigfoot to eat on. So they have decided to never go back in there to hunt. They don't even go back up that road that leads into the area where they were hunting. They stay away from there, and there's quite a few different people that have said they've heard strange noises coming out of that general direction or that general area, and the game numbers have went down in that area over the last couple of years. So the only thing I can tell anybody is if you know the area that I'm talking about, if you live here in the state of West Virginia and you know where I'm talking about, be very careful. Don't go in there unless you're carrying enough ammunition to carry out a war. Because once you get in there, these things will take a lot of damage before you can kill them. They will not hesitate to kill you. So please stay out of the area that is around Montgomery, the town of Montgomery. And if you go in there and your dogs run in there and all of a sudden they shut up, you better get to your dogs. That's all I can say about all that. So that was the story that I relayed last night to my Discord, and I invite each and every one of you to come to it, and I invite each and every one of you to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button if you like the videos and the format I'm putting on these videos. So each and every one, I hope you have a blessed evening, a blessed day, and we'll try to get you a couple more or one video next week. And it's time to say goodbye. Goodbye, y'all.